Am I the asshole for cutting off my parents and moving across the country after they beat my 7-year-old daughter with a wooden paddle for accidentally breaking a soap dispenser? Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thanks. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I need outside perspective because my entire extended family is calling me dramatic and telling me I'm overreacting. Maybe I am, but I can't get the image of what I saw out of my head. For context, I'm 34M, married to my wife Sarah, 32F, and we have one daughter Emma who just turned 7. My parents, Bob, 64M, and Linda, 61F, have always been what I'd call old-school disciplinarians. Growing up, my brother Jake, 31M, and I got spanked for major infractions, but nothing I'd call abusive. Strict, yes, but not cruel. My parents have always been very involved grandparents. They live about 20 minutes away and watch Emma every Tuesday and Thursday while Sarah and I work. Emma loves going to their house because they spoil her rotten with candy, toys, and unlimited screen time. It's been a great arrangement for 3 years now. Last month, Sarah picked up some extra shifts at the hospital where she works as a nurse, so my parents offered to keep Emma for a long weekend while I handled a big project at work. I'm in software development and was pulling 12-hour days trying to meet a deadline. Sarah would be working nights, so having Emma stay with her grandparents seemed perfect. I dropped Emma off on Friday evening. She was excited because my mom had promised to take her to the zoo on Saturday and let her help bake cookies. Emma hugged me goodbye and ran inside to show my dad a drawing she'd made at school. Everything seemed normal. Saturday evening, I called to check in. My mom answered and said Emma was being a little difficult, but nothing serious. She mentioned Emma had gotten cranky about bedtime the night before and had been mouthy during the zoo trip. I figured it was just typical 7-year-old behavior and told my mom I appreciated their patience. Sunday morning, my mom called me around 11 a.m. Her voice was different, kind of cold and formal. She said I needed to come pick up Emma immediately because her behavior had become unacceptable and they couldn't handle her anymore. When I asked what happened, she just said Emma had been disrespectful and destructive and hung up. I was confused but figured maybe Emma had thrown a tantrum or broken something. Kids do that. I drove over expecting to find my parents frustrated but handling it normally. When I walked into their house, the atmosphere felt wrong immediately. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table looking stern and angry. Emma was nowhere to be seen. I asked where she was, and my dad said she was in timeout upstairs thinking about what she did. I asked what exactly she had done, and my mother launched into this dramatic speech about how Emma had destroyed their bathroom and shown complete disrespect for their home. Apparently, Emma had been playing with my mom's expensive hand soap dispenser in the guest bathroom, trying to make bubbles in the sink. The dispenser fell and broke, spilling soap all over the counter and floor. That's it. That was the destructive behavior. A 7-year-old accidentally broke a soap dispenser while playing. But wait, it gets worse. My mom continued explaining that when they confronted Emma about the broken soap dispenser, she lied right to their faces and claimed it was an accident. Then, when they told her she was in trouble, she apparently said, "That's not fair, it really was an accident." According to my parents, this constituted talking back and being disrespectful. They decided she needed to be taught a lesson about honesty and respect. I was getting annoyed at this point because they were acting like Emma had burned down their house, but I figured they'd given her a stern talking to and maybe taken away TV privileges. I asked if I could go get her so we could go home. That's when my dad said, "She's been punished appropriately. She needed to learn that actions have consequences." Something about the way he said punished appropriately made my stomach drop. I asked what he meant by that. My mom got defensive immediately. She started going on about how in their day children were held accountable for their behavior and how kids today are too coddled. She said they'd given Emma a good old-fashioned spanking to teach her not to lie and be destructive. I felt my blood pressure rising, but I tried to stay calm. I asked exactly what they meant by spanking, hoping they meant a couple swats on the bottom over clothes. My dad stood up and crossed his arms. He said Emma had been bent over the bed and given 10 firm swats with a wooden paddle and then made to stand in the corner for an hour to think about what she'd done. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A wooden paddle. 10 hits. For accidentally breaking a soap dispenser and insisting it was an accident. I demanded to see Emma immediately. My parents tried to argue, saying she was still being punished and needed to complete her timeout, but I pushed past them and went upstairs. I found Emma in my old childhood bedroom, standing in the corner facing the wall. When she heard me come in, she turned around, and I will never forget what I saw. Her face was red and streaked with tears. Her nose was running, and she looked terrified. But what really broke my heart was how relieved she looked to see me, like she'd been rescued. "Daddy," she cried and ran to me. I picked her up, and she clung to me like her life depended on it, sobbing into my shoulder. Through her tears, she kept saying, "I didn't mean to break it, Daddy. I was just trying to make bubbles." I told them it was an accident, but they said I was lying. "It really was an accident, Daddy. I promise." I was trying to comfort her when my parents appeared in the doorway. My mother had the nerve to say, "She's manipulating you with those tears. Don't fall for it." That's when I lost it. I told them they had absolutely no right to hit my daughter, especially not with a wooden paddle, and especially not over something so trivial. I said a broken soap dispenser was not worth traumatizing a child over. My dad got in my face and said I was raising a spoiled brat and that Emma needed to learn respect. He said if I didn't discipline her properly, they'd have to, and that's what grandparents were for. I told them they were never watching Emma again, and that if they ever laid a hand on her again, I'd call the police. My mother started crying and saying I was being dramatic and cruel, and that they'd raised me and my brother just fine with the same discipline. She said I was turning Emma against them and destroying the family. I didn't care. I took Emma home. That evening, while giving Emma a bath, I saw the bruises on her bottom and thighs, dark purple marks in the clear shape of a paddle. Some were already turning yellow around the edges. My 7-year-old daughter looked like she'd been beaten. I took pictures and called our pediatrician immediately. Dr. Martinez saw us first thing Monday morning. She documented the bruises and filed a report with Child Protective Services as required by law. She also recommended Emma see a child psychologist to help process the trauma. When CPS contacted my parents, they were furious. They called me screaming about how I'd sicked the government on them and destroyed their reputations. My dad said I was an ungrateful son who was ruining their lives over nothing. My brother Jake called me that same day. He said our parents were devastated and that I was blowing this way out of proportion. He reminded me that we both got spanked as kids and turned out fine. He said I was being overly sensitive and punishing them for being loving grandparents who cared enough to discipline Emma properly. Then the rest of the family got involved. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all calling and texting me about how I was tearing the family apart and being vindictive. My mom's sister actually said I was lucky to have parents who cared enough about Emma to correct her behavior and that most grandparents wouldn't bother. They all kept emphasizing that it was just a spanking and that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Several relatives accused me of using Emma as a weapon to hurt my parents. The worst was my paternal grandmother, who called me crying and begging me to forgive and forget because my parents were good people who made a mistake. She said I was breaking an old woman's heart by keeping Emma away from her great-grandparents. Sarah was completely supportive of my decision, thank God. She was horrified when she saw the bruises and said she never wanted Emma alone with my parents again. But even some of her family members started questioning whether we were being too harsh, especially after my parents reached out to them directly, crying about how we'd abandoned them. The CPS investigation concluded that while the punishment was excessive, it didn't rise to the level of criminal abuse since it was a one-time incident and my parents had no prior reports. They recommended family counseling and parenting classes for my parents if they wanted continued contact with Emma. My parents refused both recommendations. They said they wouldn't be treated like criminals and that CPS had no right to interfere with grandparents' relationships with their grandchildren. They demanded I drop the whole thing and move on like adults. When I refused, they tried a different approach. They started sending Emma gifts, cards, and letters. The cards all said things like, "Grandma and Grandpa miss you so much," and "We love you even though Daddy is keeping us apart." Emma would ask why she couldn't see her grandparents anymore, and I tried to explain in age-appropriate terms that they had hurt her and needed to learn better ways to handle problems before she could visit them again. My parents also started showing up places they knew we'd be. Emma's school pickup, her soccer games, the grocery store near our house. They'd try to approach Emma directly, which forced me to intervene and created public scenes that embarrassed everyone. After 2 months of harassment, I sent them a certified letter stating that any further unwanted contact would be considered stalking and I'd seek a restraining order. That finally stopped the ambush encounters, but they ramped up the family pressure campaign instead. Suddenly every family gathering became about me. My cousin's wedding turned into an intervention about how I was holding a grudge and hurting innocent people. My uncle's birthday party was ruined because my parents showed up crying about their stolen granddaughter. The family started excluding Sarah and me from events, saying our presence created too much drama because my parents would get upset. Then they'd send us guilt trips about how we were missing out on family time and depriving Emma of her extended family. Jake escalated things last month when he confronted me at my workplace. He cornered me in the parking lot and said I was being childish and destroying mom and dad over nothing. He said Emma was probably over it by now, and I was traumatizing her more by keeping her from her grandparents. When I tried to walk away, he grabbed my arm and said I needed to man up and fix this situation because our parents were making themselves sick with worry. He said if I didn't reconcile soon, he'd consider taking legal action to force grandparent visitation rights. I told him to back off and never threaten me again, but he just laughed and said I'd gotten soft and needed to remember what family loyalty means. That night, I found out Jake had been telling people at Emma's school that Sarah and I were alienating Emma from her loving grandparents due to a minor disagreement. Some of the other parents started looking at us differently, and Emma's teacher pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay at home. I was furious. I called Jake and told him if he ever discussed my family situation with anyone again, especially around Emma's school, I'd sue him for defamation. He said I was losing my mind and becoming paranoid. 3 weeks ago, my parents tried one final manipulation tactic. They sent a letter addressed to Emma directly, saying they were very sick and might not have much time left and wanted to see their precious granddaughter one last time. Emma found the letter before I did and came to me crying, asking if her grandparents were going to die. I had to explain that they weren't actually sick. They were just trying to make her feel bad so she'd want to see them. That letter was the last straw for Sarah. She said we needed to consider moving away from the area to get away from my family's harassment. We started looking at houses in other states where I could work remotely. When word got out that we were planning to move, the family meltdown reached nuclear levels. My parents threatened to sue for grandparent rights. Jake said I was kidnapping Emma and committing parental alienation. Various relatives accused me of running away like a coward instead of facing my problems like a man. My paternal grandfather, who I'd always respected, called me and said I was the most selfish person he'd ever known and that I was using a child as a pawn in a personal vendetta. He said my parents had apologized repeatedly and I was too proud and stubborn to forgive. But here's the thing, they never actually apologized. Not once. They've said they're sorry I'm upset and sorry this got blown out of proportion, but they've never acknowledged that hitting Emma was wrong. They still insist they were justified and that I'm overreacting. Last week, my mom sent me a long email saying she'd been reflecting and wanted to rebuild our relationship. She said she understood I was protective of Emma and she respected that, but she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive an old woman who loves her granddaughter. The email was full of manipulation tactics. She talked about how much they'd sacrificed to help us with childcare over the years and how they'd always been there for Emma. She said they were willing to compromise and work with us to restore trust. But buried in the middle of the email, she wrote, "We still believe Emma needed some form of correction for her behavior that day, but we're willing to discuss alternative discipline methods that you find more acceptable." Even in her apology, she couldn't admit that Emma didn't deserve to be punished at all for accidentally breaking a soap dispenser. She was still trying to negotiate how much they'd be allowed to hurt my daughter in the future. I didn't respond to the email. Yesterday, Sarah and I put an offer on a house 3 states away. It's in a great school district, and I can work completely remotely. We told Emma we were moving for a new adventure, and she's actually excited about it. But the guilt is eating me alive. My entire extended family is telling me I'm destroying relationships over pride and stubbornness. They say I'm punishing everyone for my parents' one mistake. They insist that families should forgive each other and that I'm modeling unforgiving behavior for Emma. Jake sent me a final text yesterday. "You're dead to me until you fix this. Mom and Dad are heartbroken, and it's all your fault." Emma is going to grow up knowing her father kept her from people who loved her over a stupid soap dispenser. I hope you can live with that. Part of me wonders if I really am overreacting. It was one incident. My parents are older and maybe just didn't realize how hard they were hitting. Emma seems to be doing okay now, though she still flinches sometimes when adults raise their voices. Maybe I should consider supervised visits or family counseling. But then I remember those bruises. I remember how terrified Emma looked standing in that corner. I remember how she clung to me like I was saving her life. And I remember that my parents still think they were right to do it. I also think about what message it would send to Emma if I forced her to maintain a relationship with people who hurt her and refused to acknowledge it was wrong. Would she learn that her safety and feelings don't matter as much as keeping adults happy? Would she learn to accept abuse to preserve relationships? Sarah says I'm doing the right thing, but even she's starting to worry about the toll this is taking on me. I'm not sleeping well. I'm constantly checking over my shoulder for family members who might confront me, and I'm second-guessing every parenting decision I make. The hardest part is that I genuinely loved my parents before this happened. They weren't perfect, but I thought they were good people who loved Emma. Now I don't know who they really are. The people who beat my daughter and refused to admit it was wrong feel like strangers to me. I keep thinking about what kind of people can look at a 7-year-old's bruised legs and feel justified about it. What kind of people can watch a child cry in terror and think they're doing the right thing? What kind of people can refuse to acknowledge they were wrong even when confronted with photographic evidence of the harm they caused? So I'm asking strangers on the internet, am I the asshole for refusing to speak with my parents after they beat my daughter as punishment for accidentally breaking a soap dispenser? Am I really being dramatic and unforgiving? Or am I protecting my child from people who have shown they're willing to hurt her? The move is happening in 2 weeks. Once we're gone, there's probably no coming back from this. My parents will likely never see Emma again, and I'll lose my entire extended family. Emma will grow up without grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who could have enriched her life. But she'll also grow up safe from people who think hitting children with wooden paddles is acceptable punishment for accidents. I think I can live with that trade-off, but I needed to write this all out to be sure. Update. Thank you to everyone who responded. Reading your comments has helped me realize I'm not crazy or overreacting. Several people shared their own experiences with family members who refused to respect boundaries around children, and it's clear that people who won't acknowledge wrongdoing rarely change their behavior. A few people asked about Emma's therapy progress. She's been seeing Dr. Kim for 2 months now, and it's helping tremendously. Emma has been able to articulate that she felt scared and confused when her grandparents hit her because she really didn't mean to break anything. Dr. Kim says Emma's reaction is completely normal and that maintaining distance from my parents is absolutely the right choice for her emotional well-being. Emma also told Dr. Kim that she feels safer knowing that Daddy won't let anyone hurt her again. That statement alone confirmed for me that I'm making the right decision. We close on our new house next Friday. Emma is excited about her new room and the big backyard. We found a great elementary school and have already connected with some neighbor families who have kids her age. To the family members who I know are reading this, I'm done explaining myself to you. You've made it clear that you value maintaining comfortable relationships more than protecting a child from harm. Emma and I deserve better than that. We'll be just fine without people who think hitting 7-year-olds with wooden paddles is acceptable behavior. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.